All right, so Marlys is our guest today. Marlys, what is your story?
Good morning, everyone. And thanks certainly to Shannon for pulling this all together over the months and months, because it has been fantastic. And thank you all for attending. When Shannon asked me to do this, I thought, I am not in the company of these people as far as epic swimming, but I certainly do have the thread of water throughout my life. And I've learned over time that everybody has a story and mine's as funny as anyone else's. So I thought, okay, I'll tell it. So I was a little bit worried about credibility, but now I can safely say I have knit socks and a Fair Isle sweater. So I feel like that, now I'm in. And by the way, I sold my socks for a very high price because, as Bridget says, these things are priceless. Okay, so back to the swimming. My story, as with most of us, starts with my mother, who was partially insane and partially inspirational. She grew up on the shores of Lake Michigan, and water was vital to her. So my whole childhood was full of trips to the beach, trips to the lake. When we couldn't find places to swim, she would take a bath. So she was really devoted to water, which I think has become a bit of a genetic thing. I'm convinced over the years of meeting people that mothers have, there might be just a gene that's connected to this water thing, because I hear this story very, very often. So fast forward through the childhood, I never did any sort of competitive swim team swim, but always found some comfort in the water and enjoyed any chance I could get, and particularly in open water. And it was the thing where you'd see a lake and you'd say, oh, can we swim across it? And then you'd try whenever you could. And so really enjoyed that. And then as I sort of got older and started then finding friends that seemed to like to do these things, then I started to have a little group and we did these things together. Since I've lived in Oregon since the late 70s. And we've done little projects, have one that's been going on for about 10 years to swim across every lake in Oregon that's over 200 acres. It turns out there's 50 acres, but there's about 200 lakes. And we knocked off the first 75 pretty quick. And then you get to the ones that are up in the mountains, and it's an 11-mile hike and a swim, and then an 11-mile hike out. So I haven't completed that list, but we've gotten pretty far, and that's been quite fun because some of them are beautiful, stunning, Cascade Mountains, and some of them are little strange things in the dark of night that actually you're not supposed to swim in, but we do it anyway. One of my favorite swims we did was we had a moonlight swim, and we swam across a lake, and we took a picture at the end and got to the parking lot, and the sheriff was there. And it's like, what? What's your problem? And he's like, well, you can't do this. And it's like, well, we did, Later went home and looked at the pictures. And when the flash went off and the group of us standing there, there was a giant no swimming sign. So, you take those chances, but it's always a good adventure. So then the group I was swimming with, we started to do a little more adventures and found that we liked traveling and swimming. And so we did, at the time, which seemed like incredibly exotic things, we went down and did the Tahoe Relay, went to the Maui Channel a few times. It took me until 2009 to convince them to do a swim trek, which was a real launch for me. And so we went on a swim trek in Greece. And it was, I don't know if many of you have done trips like that, but you spend the week in a beautiful, pristine place, warm water, on a sailboat, and you eat, and then you swim, and then you eat, and then you swim, and then maybe you take a nap, and then you might swim again, and it just goes on day after day, and it's just the most amazing thing. So once I did that, my life became about saving up for the next one because it was so fantastic. So I did that, and a couple of years later, I went to Croatia. Then I think I took a trip to the Virgin Islands. Again, these are with Swim Trek, and I said, I need to work for these people because these trips aren't cheap. And the woman that was in charge of operations was on the Virgin Islands trip, and so I talked to her, and I said, what would it take to be a Swim Trek guide? and I thought, the company's out of England, and I thought, I don't really fit in with these people. I'm not English. It's not that exotic. Anyway, they were very kind in the very English way. And she's like, sure, this is what it would take, and happy to talk to you about it. And this is all great. So I went home and I thought, this is insane, because it just seemed insane. And I had a job, and it's like, how do you do this? I have to go to work every day. So anyway, I thought, well, I'll take the next year and sort of work on the qualifications and sort of see what happens. And so I did some life saving. I, looked at other things I had to do. And a month later, she called me and she said, can you go to Croatia next month? And I said, was that the interview? And she said, well, it seemed like that would be good. And I said, well, of course I can. Of course, not knowing what that would mean and what else I had to do to pull my act together. And I still needed to do some powerboat qualifications and things. So I put together this sort of insane, 1-week trip, traveling the coast of England, taking courses and, getting to the airport and trying to learn what I was supposed to do. And she called me back about 2 weeks later. And I said, okay, this is it. They made a mistake. They called the wrong person. And she said, we don't need you in Croatia. And I said, okay, thanks for asking. I really appreciate it. She says, but can you go to Turkey for a month? And I said, of course. Of course, I'd never been to Turkey. It sounded even more exotic than Croatia, because I had done the Croatia trip. And she said, and we need you to be the lead guide. Wow. And I said, you realize I've never done this before. And she said, oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. They always say, no worries. And so I, changed things around, went back to work, and I said, I'm leaving for a month. And they're like, okay. Anyway, as much as the first week of being a guest on a swim trek was the best week of my life, it turns out that guiding was the best week of my life, or in this case, the month. It's that piece of knowing how these people might feel, having the experience that I had had, and enabling them to have it. It was just amazing. I really loved it. I couldn't get enough. Not to mention, you're in an exotic place and looking at beautiful things and speaking different languages and eating exotic food. And I came home and I said, I have to do this again, So I went back to work for the year. And so for the next 2 or 3 years, I just said, I'll do whatever I can, for swim trek. And I kept doing a little more and a little more and a little more. And so I was doing a month, I was doing 2 months, I was doing 3 months. And after a while, I called my job and I said, are you okay if I do this? And they said, well, we're pretty sure if we say no, you're going to do it anyway. So we'll just take you when we can get you. So I thought that was very kind. So I did that for another couple years. And then, because I was still trying to maintain the home job. So, as it goes, you get up at 4 a.m. and try to get some weird internet connection to pretend that you're sort of working and keeping things moving along. And it sort of didn't make any sense anymore. So I finally just quit my job and I started doing swim trek full time. And I think, let's see, last year I went to 12 countries. I counted it up. It was some millions of yards of swimming or watching swimming. And it's just amazing, So I spent time in the Galapagos, in the Caribbean, places in Europe, Asia, the Virgin Islands, and now we have a couple trips in the US that I've been working on. And it's just been fantastic. And then of course we get to 2020 and well, I don't do that now. So I've been home for this year, sort of waiting for things to fix. And as far as swimming, I was talking to Shannon a little bit about my actual swimming. It turns out when you spend time helping other people swim, which is wonderful, you don't get to swim very much yourself. But in the last year, I think I did probably the most sort of epic swims for me. And this is the part I really like about my personal swimming, is when I just surprise myself. So the first one was when I had spent 6 weeks in the Galapagos on swim trek. So that's in January and February. And then from there, I went to the St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean and did a week there. So this whole time, I'm not really getting in much swimming. And then I decided to go do the long distance training camp in New York as a guest, because you get to occasionally go on a trip with swim trek as a guest. And I've been really curious about cold water swimming. So I flew over there from the tropics, sort of jumped in the sea in Majorca, and through the encouragement and support of the wonderful coaches that Swim Trek has on that trip, I did the week and did the 6-hour swim, and it was great. I loved cold water, and I loved that experience, and I loved watching all those people shiver in the boat with me. So that was great. And then since I was on such a roll that year, I continued on guiding. Throughout the year. I was in Montenegro and several other places, again, sort of trying to squeeze in swims here and there. I went to Lake Zurich and crewed for another Swim Trek guide, and she did the Lake Zurich swim, which was great. It's a beautiful swim, and it was wonderful. And then the next week we went up and we both swam Vidostern, which is lake swim in Sweden. They bill it as 21 plus K, but it's 25 if it's an inch. But the interesting about the Swedish swim, because my background is, well, my mother was Swedish. In the true Swedish way, they had aid stations and they had cinnamon buns and coffee. It was like, oh my God, this is the best. This is the best. So I found that really lovely, and wasn't sure I'd swim that long, but I did. And it was like my friend always told me, when you're swimming, well, when I'm swimming for hours and hours, the thought in my head is, I'm going to miss this when it's over. So it's like you kind of don't want it to end. But when it does end, it's okay. So yeah, then here I am back in Oregon. And all throughout this time, I've been also teaching and doing some coaching at Oregon State, mostly with the faculty staff fitness program, so for adults. And now I'm actually teaching a student class in competitive swimming, which has been interesting. And again, sort of trying not to watch the news too much, but sort of waiting for that day when I can hit the road again. Mm-hmm. So that's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been obviously all over the world. Is there a favorite place that you've been to?
You would think there might be, and it's a very common question because, yeah, why wouldn't you ask? But it turns out,
I'm not a person that, it's funny that I asked the question, even because I'm not a person who like has favorites. Like I prefer to appreciate everything for its value. Just like I love every person's marathon swim story. So it's funny that I asked the question, but I still like to pin people down.
Yeah. Every place, and I'm just saying this because I want everyone to go everywhere. Every place has something about it that's favorite, right? So if you want to swim with mantas and hammerheads, yeah, you go to the Galapagos. And penguins, you could swim with penguins. But some of the culture in other places are amazing. Montenegro's a nice place because it's really picturesque, and you get to swim in lakes and in the sea and in the Adriatic and in bays. And of course, the Oregon Lakes is fabulous. And we do a swim in Arizona that's also fabulous, in the Scar Lakes. And as you know, those are beautiful and fun places to swim. So no, I don't have a favorite. Yeah, fair. I'll go anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. Tell me about so any scary experiences that you've had in all of your travels, swimming all over?
You mean scary as far as swimming scary, people scary, airplane scary?
Let's start with swimming scary.
Yeah. I think, and I think many of you would appreciate this. And I like it when occasionally I'll put a guest in my boat because they want to take a break or whatnot. And they'll sit in the boat for a while and then they'll say, oh my God, this is really hard. Because it looks like you're just bobbing along in your boat. But it's a really full-on, intense, from a safety perspective thing. So, you've got to, of course, just watch out for the well-being of the swimmers and the boats around you and other sorts of obstacles. So, I don't know that I've had any scary moments, but tense moments where you're sort of trying to anticipate whether someone's doing well and how they're feeling and, what your choices are. We always have this mantra where we say, I'll notice within 10 seconds if you have an issue, and likely notice before you might, and I'll be to you with 10 seconds later. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty high bar. So you have to be pretty much available. So it's a bit exhausting in some ways, as lovely and relaxing as it looks.
Right. Yeah.
But so far so good.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
With any of your personal swims, have you had any of your personal swims had any scares with your night swimming and, I don't know, ocean swimming? Anything?
I think in general, I sort of tend to be the person that's going to be the last one to be scared, because I'm thinking about, is anyone else scared? So you got to be like super tough. And yeah, pretend you're not cold, and pretend you didn't see that, whatever it is that you saw, that you're not sure what it was. So I think, and maybe it's because my memory's going, but I am happier in the water and less scared in the water than anywhere else in any other environment. So it doesn't seem like it comes up too much. I mean, I can remember one time in the Maui Channel, it was a year that it was a little bit rough and pretty high swells. And as sometimes you go in those swims and you sort of rent a boat from the local person and you don't really know them, and you just sort of hope they have a good understanding of the swim and it'll go well. But I'm not sure that the first year the boat captain we had was that experienced with supporting swimmers. So you'd be in the water and there was no sign of the boat. It's like, and part of it was just the swells. It was hard to see the boat, and it was difficult for the boat to stay on a path. And I very distinctly remember this time, I just sort of went to take a breath, and there were 3 meters of water above me because there was this big swell. And I went through this thought of saying, oh, this should make me nervous. But it was relaxing. It's like, oh, this is beautiful. I'll just breathe later. And so it seems to be a place that gives me great peace more than nerves.
Mm-hmm.
So far.
That's good. Let's talk a little bit about your I guess. I mean, and I get this a little bit too with like being a coach, but also a swimmer. But like, is there any way that you found that you can, I guess, kind of marry the two, or that I don't know, that one can promote the other? Like, have you found that your stroke has changed as you've kind of watched and coached other swimmers, or how has being like transitioning to kind of that? Do you think of yourself as more of a coach or a guide? Start with that.
I would just call me a flat out adventurer. And I think you can have adventure in both coaching and guiding.
Yeah.
I would say that my coaching experience has me much more thoughtful about the technical aspects of swimming. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot about the technical aspects and the mechanics. And I find that explaining to people the sort of the mechanics of it and the physiology of it, and things, principles of buoyancy and principles of propulsion, helps me explain it to other people, and also helps me understand what I might be trying to do. So mm-hmm. There's that. As far as what it's done for my swimming, watching so many people swim makes me just jealous of beautiful swimmers. Because there are some real, particularly in the ocean, when you get someone that's just really strong and technically supreme and you watch them swim, it's just beautiful. I could do it all day. Oh, and I do.
Yeah, such a gift. So that's interesting. So you think that do you think people are some swimmers are kind of naturally inclined to like this perfect technique, or do you think it's something that anyone can achieve?
I think absolutely anyone can achieve it if they're interested. Mm-hmm. Likewise, I have maybe just as many guests who want to wear their bobble hat and swim breaststroke and eat jelly babies. Which is fine, because those people are also enjoying the water, but in a different way. They don't have that sort of strive to change much of anything. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you have this. I mean, I have it all the time. I'll talk to someone about a particular piece of their swimming, and I'll say, I bet you've heard this before. And they'll say, yeah, for 100 years, and I'm not changing. It's like, okay, that's fine. You enjoy that. So yeah, but I really like to think about the technical part, because I think it, for me, as let's just say I'm still improving, why not, or trying to, those are the things that are going to work for me. And I think those are the things that work for other people. Mm-hmm. And I think it also helps with just the understanding. It's like, well, why do I want to do that? It's like, okay, here's why.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to tell people why. Yeah. Do you think that you are process or outcome driven?
Well, let's see. You can figure this out. I like to label and color code everything, but I also like it when it's over. So I don't know where that puts me.
Have you found with the pandemic and like not having the travel and things, like how's that kind of set for you? Obviously you said you're looking forward to, you know, things coming back, but have you kind of gotten through this year so far?
Well, I drink more. I watch too much news. And with Sue's inspiration, actually, I'm building a boat. So if it goes all belly up, I can just get in my boat. But yeah, I mean, the pandemic has been awkward. I remember in the beginning thinking, well, okay, we'll do this for a few weeks. Because I really didn't believe it could last this long. And then obviously it has. And now I'm sort of convinced it might last quite a bit longer in terms of actually doing something. So I guess you just sort of resign yourself to it. I mean, I've done more swimming locally than I have in years and years and years, and that's been really fun and interesting. And Sue and I are going to try to swim through the winter. Yeah. So that's going to be interesting. I don't know how that's going to go because it's going to get cold, quite cold. So,
you said you like cold water swimming.
I do. And so we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Are you one of those people who has like a threshold? I feel like there's certain people you meet that I swim with. Jocelyn knows who I'm talking about. There's people who are like, oh, it's a certain temperature. Now I have to like put on the neoprene cap, or I have to like, right, versus just get in the water and like see what happens. Where do you put yourself on that scale?
Yeah. So I'm curious, and it'll be an experiment to see how far I can go and how long I can do it. And Sue and I have a discussion always about, are we being smart or are we, is this the last swim? It's like, I don't know. We'll find out, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the good way to approach it.
Yeah. So that's been good. But yeah, I'm ready for the pandemic to be over. Ready for the election to be over. Ready to think about something else, but hanging in.
Yeah. Has any of your, like, I think of you, I guess, with all of your travels and everything, that you must kind of feel like you can kind of adapt to a lot of changing situations. Have you found any of that kind of knowledge and experience from your travels or your swims to carry over to kind of buoy you through the pandemic?
Yeah, I would say, for one thing, my brother and his wife have moved in with me, and which has been great. And I think the whole sort of traveling and working with Swim Trek has been interesting from the standpoint of 10 years ago, if you'd asked me, I'd say, I don't really like people. And I don't, I really sort of like my own space and all this stuff. And I've realized I'm much more flexible than I thought I was. And a lot of times I'll go to, like I say, you go to these strange countries, and Swim Trek accommodations for guests are wonderful. For guides, not so much. So, I call them my cribs, that I'll sleep in some weird moldy apartment in a bed that my legs hang over the edge, and, the sink doesn't quite work. And it's okay. I'm okay with it. I'm surprised at how sort of flexible and relaxed I've been. And as far as the people part, I mean, I work with, 15 to 20 people a week nonstop. And as you can imagine, in the swimming world, most of the people are just lovely. And of course, they're on holiday and having a good time. But I've also learned that everybody has a story. And sometimes it takes a little longer to get to their story. They're all fascinating. And it's kind of fun to sort of get to know people in a way that I didn't think I had the gumption to do, but it turns out I do. So that's been great.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah, it's been good.
What was I had a question on the tip of my tongue about oh shoot, that was a good one too. Oh yeah. Distance. Have you noticed when you're guiding people that you can kind of tell like who's going to be like they're ready to like see what they can do versus the people that are, with the bobble hats on, maybe. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the giveaway. How
Yeah.
can you kind of read people? Have you learned to read people
Well,
better?
the thing is about the people, with just to give some credit to the people with the bobble hats, and they're not really bobble hats, but a lot of these people can swim all day. So we have swims that will have some sort of bounds, whether, there's an island here to an island there, or we only have the boat for 3 hours, or, we're supposed to be somewhere for lunch. And we do a really good job of accommodating all sorts of speeds and capacities and interests within a given swim, which is sort of an amazing art form I've learned to find out. And so I'll go up to someone, I'll say, okay, the swim needs to end. It's like, oh no, I can swim all day. I know you can swim all day, but I don't want to watch you swim all day. But yeah, I mean, there are swimmers that come on the trip, or teams, an entire team will come on the trip. But for the most part, on these trips, people are really about where they are and what they're doing. And yeah, they might want to do 10K a day if they're more aggressive swimmers, or more accomplished swimmers. But really, come on, you're in Turkey, or you're in, the Maldives, or you're in, so you can pretty much convince these people that just enjoying the water is a good thing. Or there'll be a day where we think we're going to do some great swim, and we'll end up going, I don't know, 2 kilometers, because there were hammerheads to play with. So yeah, I in general, the people that come on Swim Trick are there for the holiday sort of adventure piece of it. But within that, you certainly have some amazing swimmers that come. I had a swim that was a private trip, and those are kind of fun because it's just, you're usually just one guide, and it's a smaller group. And it was a group of world class triathletes from New Zealand and their family. And these guys have a lot of gold medals and, bling in their past, but they were there on holiday, and it was great. And there was one day where we had swum over to an island, and we got to the island and the power was out. So lunch wasn't going to be available. There was no water, there was no way to cook lunch. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Because we were hours from home, and we were supposed to have another swim, but there was no food on the boat. And it was like, it's like really stressing out. And the guy says to me, do they have rosé? And I, so I went to the restaurant. I said, do you have any rosé? And he's like, yeah, we got 4 bottles. We'll take those. We're fine. And so, people are just enjoying themselves, and it's great to spend time with them there.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
When you think about your own swimming, when did you kind of know like you could swim? Like when did you decide, like when you were saying, yeah, I'll let you tell me. When did you decide like I could swim across a lake versus like a big lake?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when did you kind of like let that enter your mind as an option?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I think the roots of it were, I went to this camp when I was like in 8th grade. It was like a summer classic cabin in the woods on the lake camp. But, all my stories start with the part where there wasn't really any money. So I had to go to a camp that cost $35 because I had a paper route, and that's how much money I had. And so I went with I had some friends who were going. So I said, great, I'll go to this camp. And it turns out it was this aggressive Baptist camp, which wasn't something I was particularly used to. So there were lots of rules and lots of encouragement to take the path that they were laying out for you, which was really sort of not interesting to me. But it was difficult because I was young and everyone else was, on the path. And I was like, I'm uncomfortable with this. I don't, but they had activities. And one of the activities they had was swimming and diving, actually. And it turns out this was the first time I realized I'm kind of good at this. And so I won every swimming prize that they offered. And on the last day they had diving. And I said, well, I'm not a diver, but I, jumped off the diving board and did some sort of splash. And I won diving. And so we got to the end of the week of camp, and since everything was just counting up points, I won the all camp award.
Wow.
But it was awkward because I hadn't accepted the path of the camp. And so they're kind of like giving me this prize and like, here's your prize, but please don't come back. And it was like, oh, maybe I can swim. Of course, it was completely ridiculous because my population that I was with were, not who you might. But anyway, it got in my head there that maybe swimming was something I could do. So I just carried on with it. And it just was the thing I was better at than all the other things I tried. Mm-hmm. So I just sort of, decided that was what I was going to do. And it was just, I just gravitated to it. And, it wasn't a plan. It just happened, and it keeps happening. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going with it.
Yeah. Yep. It's good to be open to whatever options come up, right?
Yeah. It's good.
What would you say motivates you to keep going? Start within the water, and then we'll go on land.
It's not really motivate me to going. It's I can't stop. Mm. So it's the only thing in my life I can say, and I keep reviewing this because I think there's got to be one. I have never regretted a swim in my life, not one swim, and every time I swim, I'm better. 100%. There's nothing I can say that about anything else. I mean, you'd think you could say it about eating ice cream, but no, because you eat too much and it's bad, right? So literally, it's the best thing I do for myself, for my body, my brain, my mood. In fact, one time I had a job interview that was going to be a sort of shift in things, and I was involved in a swim group at noon. And I went to the job interview, and I said, I can't take this job if I can't break every noon and go to the pool for my swim. And I said, and I'm pretty sure I can't take this job unless you come with me. Because once I got my boss engaged in swimming, luckily he was a swimmer. Then we didn't have any new meetings. It just changed the whole experience of working at that place. And that's how important, it was obviously that important to me that this is the thing I don't compromise on. Anything else, fine, I'm flexible, but I'm not flexible about this. Mm-hmm. So I think I just can't not do it.
Love that. Huh. I love this perspective. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So for swimming, you can't not do it. What motivates you to keep going on land Yeah.
Well, clearly so I can go swimming again, I guess. But short of that, what motivates me on land, I guess it's sort of like that. It's like I can't not be motivated because things are just too interesting not to just do it. Mm-hmm. My sort of thing is when people say to me, do you wanna? I'm like, yes, what are we doing? Mm. So yeah, I think that's sort of how it goes. And if no one comes up with any ideas, then I'll think of something kooky and make them do it.
When did you, I guess you had the idea to go to the Baptist camp. So I was going to say, when did you first realize this, this like desire to do you wanna, or let's do, like, was that something you've just always had?
I'm afraid, I think if you were to interview my friends, somewhere in their story would be, oh yeah, Marlys made me do that. So I don't want to think it's as forceful as just providing opportunities. And it's usually good. Sometimes it goes awry, but at least it's funny.
What do you think? I'm going to come around to the kind of inclusion questions. How do you think we can get more people out on the water?
I think that's a really, really good question because the lack of diversity. I mean, for me, growing up, clearly the economic question is huge. Not only, when you talk about traveling and swimming, that's sort of another level, but even access to a pool is hugely expensive. The only reason I swam when I was a young person was my sister had polio, and she was a quadriplegic, and my crazy mother was convinced that she should swim, which meant we dragged her around in the pool. But she was just a big believer in this hydrotherapy. But the piece of that was that I then got to go to the pool at this kind of fancy club in the summers for quite a while, and wouldn't have had that without that opportunity. So I think pool access is huge. I work a bit with USMS, and I think they need to start putting efforts into infrastructure as much as membership, because I think access to water, whether it's pool or whether it's lake. I'm also very involved in the adult learn to swim, swimming save lives kinds of things. So I think getting populations acquainted with water and safe near water, that obviously then leads to swimming. So I think it's really about investing and inserting yourself into communities that aren't going to come to us because that's a big ask, and it's not going to happen naturally. I think we have to create those opportunities in different ways than we have been able to so far. I don't really have the checklist of how to do that. But
it does. But that's why we kind of surf ideas across the board. You never know what comes up. So I think that's good. I don't expect anyone to have a checklist.
Yeah. So I think a big thing is about access.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to somebody on your swim trip that says, I really want to be a marathon swimmer? What would you tell them?
I think all the advice that you hear from folks makes a lot of sense. Ask a lot of questions. Like everyone suggested, we're all about sharing the sport, the experience, the opportunities as much as we can. So it's that. And then, of course, you've got to just keep swimming, right? And I think that's it. I think if you have the affinity for water and you're interested in pursuing that in a sort of endurance kind of way, that you just kind of do it, and whoops, all of a sudden, look, you're doing it. And you'll have a lot of support, that there's so much support out there for everybody. I think that's the other thing that everyone talks about that is true. It sounds sort of hokey, but this is the best community for humanity that I've experienced, and it's just lovely. So you just gotta keep doing it.
Has there been any I guess swimmers that have inspired you?
Well, I don't think I can say it publicly, but there's a number of swimmers I'm stalking because their swims are just so beautiful. But the swimmers that inspire me are the people I meet that don't think they can do it, but you can tell they want to, and then they do. And it's just amazing. I mean, this is a little bit different, but I had a guest, it was actually one of my early years on a trip. And at the end of the week, she was an older woman and she was a beautiful swimmer. And she had done this 5K swim from Greece to Turkey. We do this kind of cool swim. It's cool to swim from one country to another in the ocean,
That's awesome.
And not to mention for her, that was the longest swim she had done. And she didn't know she could do it. And I always say, just get in and start and see if you surprise yourself. And they always do.
That's the best advice you can give somebody.
Okay. And then at the end of the week, we're at the dinner and she's just like sobbing. And I'm like, oh my God, I've done something terribly wrong, because I always think I often do, but and I said, what's wrong? What's wrong? And she says, 6 months ago, I was lying in a hospital. I was diagnosed with stage 4, something awful, and wasn't to live. And I had this on my calendar. And it's the only reason I'm alive today, is because I wanted to come and do this. And it's like, oh my God, it's like, and that story, that kind of story happens to me a lot. And it's just amazing. These people are amazing.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Wow. What would you recommend to somebody who, let's see, I know you're just going to tell us to go for it. Yeah. Is there anything about swim treks that we should know that we don't know today?
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, it is expensive. I get that, so it's a hard thing to do. I think the one thing, and I didn't do this, but now that I have the experience. So the first few I went on, I went with all my friends because I was afraid, I wasn't a big traveler. I didn't know about these exotic swims. And I felt like that's a good crutch. I'll go with my friend. And it was fun. We had a lovely time, and we came home and had great stories to tell and great pictures and whatnot. But the trips when nobody knows anybody, and so we're together for 7 days, and it takes about 16 hours, and there's this whole new family. Mm-hmm. And these bonds that people make with each other when they're sort of in a desirable, fun place, but scary. I mean, everyone's kind of nervous, sort of traveling on their own. Then you have this new group, and this happens over and over and over. So I have this group that I saw in Milos. Nobody knew anyone. By the end of the week, they were fast friends and planning each other's kids' weddings and Then they get together and they go on another trip together because now they're this new family. And it's great because you would not put these people together and say these people will be friends, but they have this bond of water and this bond of adventure. And it just blossoms, and it's a beautiful thing. So I would say, go on a swim trip, go alone, and come on one of my trips.
That's good. Good advice. Oh man, I just love it. I'm just gonna